Hi, I'm Todd. I am going to go through this fairly quickly because I'm guessing, based on some of the early feedback I've received in the hallways, that you as a people have a collective desire to talk about this in front of each other, and I will try to facilitate that. So the Lord works in strange and mysterious ways, and I'm some of the more mysterious of those ways. So what is that? Just agenda. This is a technical description from the perspective of the routing tables of a single and fascinating to many large-scale D3peering event. I am not going to focus on the political, ethical, financial, strategic aspects of this. That has consumed the bulk of most people's interest. And those are in fact interesting topics, but those are topics that I believe are not, we as a large group of people are not going to agree upon. So I would encourage people to focus at least a little bit, if you can, on the actual routing impact of this. And then we can discuss in the hallways over beer the broader topics. I'm not touching government regulation with a 20-meter pole, and I'm guessing all of you will, and good luck with all that. This is also, and this is important because there was a lot of feedback about this in terms of the content of the NANOG mailing list. This is not an education on what settlement-free peering is or how it works. And if you really don't know how any of that stuff works, that's cool. You've got an 80% chance that the person next to you does, and I encourage you to avail yourself of them. So, who are the players? In this corner, we have level 3, AS3356, and a whole slew of others. Weighing in at 49,000 on-net prefixes, 1,325 globally visible BGP adjacencies, occasionally the service provider to champions or the carrier's carrier. There are IGP incidents aside, but we're not going to discuss those tonight. In the other corner, we have AS174 Cogent and a whole slew of others because there was a lot of stuff that got bought. Weighing in at 11,000 or 14,000 or 14,500 prefixes, depending on who you are and what your ratios need to be. 1,332 globally visible BGP adjacencies, the scrappy underdog, training hard, bulking up fast, ready to take on the challenge, the contender. This is the contender, absolutely. Many people have seen this. Credit goes, I haven't seen Marty today, but credit goes to the inimitable Marty Hannigan. Just a little visual slide. So the timeline. The timeline's going to be a mix of things I know for certain, things I'm pretty sure about, and things I've heard, and there's a little bit of attribution about that. So according to level 3, they notified Cogent of their intent to disconnect on 31 July. There's a reason, by the way, when we go into the routing stuff, there's a reason I go back in time, because there are many claims made about sales activity and peering activity leading up to the D3peering, before the D3peering, and some of that's going to matter in terms of when that might have started. So I'm not going to cover most of that, but if you are digging into some of the adjacency changes, some of the potential sales activities, what different people connected to when, then you would want to know when to start looking. So according to level 3, they claim they notified Cogent of their intent to disconnect on 31 July. Cogent and level 3 are widely believed to have notified their sales department and not their customers, and that was that. On 16 August, many people have talked to many other customers, and many people themselves were spoken to by Cogent sales reps trying to get sold Cogent connections, and those calls apparently mentioned a 15 September expected D3peering date. We now know that's not when things happened. Level 3 claims in a press release to have re-notified Cogent again in their intent to disconnect on 31st August. On the 5th of October, which is well over a month after the additional date and more than 2 weeks after the September 15th date, Cogent is actually disconnected by level 3. Mass hysteria spreads throughout the world. Senators and members of Congress in the US make speeches about government regulation of the private interconnection policies of large backbones. Dogs and cats living together in harmony. That happened about 9:50 UTC. On the 7th of October, around 1900 UTC, Level 3 reconnects Cogent. According to a press release, they have a 10 a.m. UTC 9 November plan to re-D-peer. And yes, Raz, when Cogent is re-D-peered by Level 3, some networks will be outaged. What are the stakes? As we said, Cogent has 11 to 14,500, depending on who you believe and who you are, on-net prefixes. Here's some interesting numbers that other people may not have in the back of your head. 2,300 single-homed prefixes, 119 single-homed ASs, and a big /8. So we measured those by measuring the number of prefixes that were unreachable in Level 3's table during the period of the D-peering. So it is quite possible that many of these are simply errors or misconfigurations, and some of them may be fixed by the next time. But for this event, those were the ASs and prefixes that were single-homed. Level 3 has 49,000 on-net prefixes. 5,100 of those are single-homed. 121 single-homed ASs and some big /8s. So the event, as it happened, so between 9 a.m. UTC and 11 a.m. UTC, Cogent lost 5,081 routes from Level 3. Level 3 lost 2,322 routes from Cogent. When they came back, they both, Cogent regained significantly fewer routes from Level 3, having solved some problems in the meantime, and we'll look at what those were. And Level 3 regained almost the same, about 100 less. So there's variations in the tables, and that's to be expected. Here's a graph of that event, and you'll notice some features of that. The green is 3356, Level 3, and the red is Cogent. They start at roughly the same sort of bloated, unnecessarily deaggregated routing table, right up there, where you would expect it to be. And you don't get the traffic if you don't deaggregate and send all those prefixes out, from what I hear. And so 3356 drops down here, and they stay flat, and then they come back up, and they're back up to where. That's normal. What's surprising is this. This in particular is sort of interesting shenanigans that we're going to look into. The rest of it, there's more variation, and we're not sure what that's about. So what came back in the interim for Cogent? The big deal was Roadrunner. 45 ASs, 761 prefixes, all previously single-homed behind 3356, magically reappear with the transit path of 1668 via Vario into Cogent. So obviously those ASs and those POPs were cabled up, configured, previously tested, and a configuration was changed. So I don't know the answer to this, and Vijay may comment on it or he may not later about sort of how that happened and why they were single-homed behind Level 3 in the first place. Let me go back to something that I didn't emphasize strongly enough back during the event. During the outage period, Level 3 and Cogent each carried routes for the other. So things were leaked, and now's a good time to talk about what was leaked and who did the leaking. And it was a little bit more than we thought it would. So who were the leakers to Level 3? Level 3 carried a total of 37 prefixes that had 174 routes. WillTel was the biggest leaker with almost a majority of those. And we'll look at a few paths just to see what those look like. Cogent carried 134 Level 3 routes. And the biggest leaker there was Reach. Teleglobe had a little bit, and Vario had a tiny bit. And then it's sort of down in the noise there. So here's some sample paths that we see, and these are paths, I should emphasize, these are announcements that we see in routing tables during the partitioning event. So you see, here's a Cogent, somebody leaks it to UUNet, UUNet leaks it to Level 3, or somebody leaks it to, in this case, WillTel leaks it to Level 3. So this is, I guess, not shocking, but a little bit larger degree of leakage and more widespread than I would expect. So it's not the case that we can sort of make fun of 3 particular people here and go home happy that we've had that wonderful experience. It's more the case that pretty much everybody leaked at least a little bit. And so there's a lot more routing configuration work that needs to be done at some large ASs. So who were the winners? Who got the previously the previously routed through this edge, if you consider the edge between those two ASs, between 174 and 3356, that carried some multi-home traffic. Who got those? Well, there's not actually all that interesting a story to tell with regard to level 3. A bunch of other big ASs picked up those paths, and that's as you would expect it. The 3356 previous routes to Cogent, vast majority went through Vario, and the reason for that is the Roadrunner paths, the ATDN Vario Roadrunner path. It really tells the bulk of that story. So you may say to yourselves, and I have heard publicly on the list, these people are just fools, these single-homed ASs, they get what they pay for. And that may be right, but there are some fairly prominent fools who didn't have the redundancy that they may have expected. And so I think it's nice to be sort of superior sounding and say, all right, you just need to do that. But it's also important to know what the reality is out there and who's being harmed by this. And so here are some examples. I mean, the level 3, or Cogent is not publicly known to be the service provider to the financial services sector, but there are a number of big financial services companies who show up behind Cogent, who were single-homed behind Cogent during this event. Same thing, level 3, had quite a few. General Services Administration, Department of Health and Human Services, TIAA, CREF. These are sort of non-trivial things. So during the outage, as I mentioned, 1,298 previously single-homed prefixes behind level 3 regained connectivity to Cogent, largely because of the 761 Roadrunner prefixes. 142 previously single-homed prefixes behind Cogent regained any connectivity to level 3. So the number of prefixes lost by Cogent was larger. The repair effort on their part during the event was also more effective and larger. So some quick summary conclusions here. This was not a catastrophe for our industry, of course, but it was significant. 4.3% of the prefixes that are normally routed in the existing bloated global tables were involved in this, and about 1% of globally visible ASs were affected directly. The leaking is a little bit more interesting part of the story that I was surprised at. Before Eileen and I started looking at this, leaking wasn't something we expected to focus on. Lots of networks are not filtering their customers. Lots of networks are not. Nobody's filtering their peers, and most of the smaller networks aren't correctly filtering their providers. So there's a lot of work to be done there. A few creative fixes as we mix. And November 9th is coming up. It's right around the corner, and there's fun to be had. So this is more just sort of to whet your appetite and stay tuned to this station. Thanks very much, and some technical credits. Any questions?
D3peered, AOL. How are you reaching the conclusion that a significant portion of Roadrunner was singly homed?
That it dropped coincident with the D3peering.
When you mean dropped, you mean they were not reachable from Cogent?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, now the correct answer is technically from a routing perspective they were single-homed, but they were actually not single-homed from a physical perspective. They were multi-homed, and there was local depreffing going on in between ATDN and Cogent. So that suppressed the pads because Cogent was not taking, the level 3 pads were winning out over the ATDN pads in Vario's network, and they were not being propagated to Cogent.
Okay.
So from Vario's perspective, it was multi-homed, but from Cogent's perspective, due to the filtering policies applied at the edge, they were singly homed.
Got it. Interesting, thank you.
Yeah,
Dan?
a quick question on some of the folks who are lost, like the GSA and CNET and whomever else. Those are just folks with autonomous systems, correct? I mean, there could be lots of other statically routed folks, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you got to hope for that.
I'm just surprised to see folks evidently talking BGP but are single-homed. I mean, are these routing policy issues, or any idea what's going on there?
I don't. I mean, my suspicion is that although this, you know, the situation with Roadrunner is obviously complicated and interesting from an engineering perspective, my suspicion is that at a high level, there's got to be people who have some sort of cold failover in place, which are either configuration errors or configuration choices, that the way to really, really depref one of your providers is to not announce your routes out unless you need to, I guess.
I'm just wondering if there's anyone out here who can actually comment on one of these 6 who might be nearby.
So I happen to represent one of them. Actually, was on the other page, so I won't switch back. So I have to mention which. The AS that was lost was a small data center out of London that is single-homed, but it's fairly insignificant for the overall business. Most of what we do comes out of a couple of locations in the U.S., and it is very much multi-homed.
So, Todd, would you say that this is a classic game of chicken? And if so, which side do you think blinked first? You indicate the number of routes seem to be twice as many prefixes that Level 3 had as compared to Cogent. So in this case, is this a really big player that is twice as strong and powerful, or are all routes not created equal?
Well, against my better judgment, I'll comment on those questions. So people lie about their traffic, and so obviously none of us really knows. Most people don't know how much traffic is on their own networks, and none of us really knows how much traffic is on Cogent or Level 3's network. They are, you know, Level 3 is obviously the older, bigger network in some sense, but by virtue of selling transit in a lot of markets as cheaply as they do, Cogent is the preferred bulk volume provider for many, many of their customers. And so if you have a large, multi-homed, mostly multi-homed customer base who prefers you because you're cheaper, then a couple things happen. One is that you're likely to get more traffic per customer than you would if you cost more. That doesn't mean more dollars, but it does mean more traffic. The second thing is your customers may be more tolerant of these sorts of network partitioning errors than people who either pay you more or for whom you are a more important provider. And I think, yeah, it's a game. I mean, all de-peerings are a game of chicken, and this one just got played out a little bit more publicly. And this is not, I mean, this is probably the 10th or 15th interesting de-peering that's happened this calendar year. So exactly why this one got as much public attention, I'm a little bit unclear about and mystified about. But yeah, I would say it is a game of chicken. There are stakes. The number of prefixes is not just the issue. If ISP A or if ISP C has a customer base that's happy buying, you know, 98% of the internet and is willing to pay $10 a megabit to do that, and ISP 3 does not have a customer base that's willing to buy that, then in a de-peering event, ISP C has a lot of leverage and they can survive a lot longer.
The other thing that comes up has to do with the amount of pain that both parties felt. And of course, there's no way you can know that, but that's part of the interesting thing about this is my experience looking at past de-peerings is that actually there is a great deal of pain to be spread across all customers on both sides of the situation, particularly as things like voice over IP and other services that folks kind of expect to just work kick in. So I'm hoping that nothing happens on that November date.
Good luck with all that.
Let me comment on the voice over IP thing. Most partitionings of voice over IP stuff don't happen when they're de-peering, because normally your provider that you're connecting to for termination or origination of voice over IP and the provider you already have a business relationship with embodied in your voice over IP service contract. So this is the voice over IP partitioning, I believe, is a little bit of a red herring and not something that we really need to be worried about.
Except for the million Vonage customers.
Oh.
Sorry. Except for the million Vonage customers. And
yes.
Chris from MCI. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
There are those million folks, but there's 10 million MCI Advantage customers. I'm certain that weren't affected. No, we don't have that many customers. Somebody just wishes we did, not me. I was going to say that some of the folks that look like they're multi-homed, the reason that they have BGP might be that they have multiple sites inside of the network. So some of our customers do that. They'll be multi-homed, but they use their own AS and have multiple connections or multiple sites. So
Sure.
that could be an artifact for that.
Sure. That's an interesting point to pick up, though. Back to your sort of brief comment, is that Chris, is the Vonage customers are effectively, or many of them are effectively single-homed behind level 3 for at least part of that Vonage service, and that may be why this got the political stink that it did. I'm not sure. I'm sorry?
I'm not 100% certain, but I know of an interface that connects to Vonage that gets lots and lots and lots of really small packets. It's not on level 3's network. So I think that they spread that around as well. But
Okay.
That depends on like what rate centers and DIDs they've got. I mean, you partition the service area into various DIDs, various rate centers, and then some of them are on some provider and some of them are on others.
Sure.
So,
And
yeah.
my particular comment about the million customers, I think, will go back to VJ and Roadrunner, right? Some Roadrunner customers or other cable and DSL people might have been partitioned from Vonage, potentially, or from their other provider, like name the other 16,000 Vonage-ish like people. But there's a million Vonage customers I know of. So.
Right, absolutely. More, Bill Norton?
No, just one last comment. I want to thank you for putting this together. You've done a good job here of summarizing what otherwise took about 150 or 200 messages on the NANOG mailing list.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate that.
Thank you.